Welcome back, everyone. We are preparing to begin our next session. So I will turn it over to the moderator, who is Patrick Heiman.
Thanks, Steve. Hi, folks. So first off, apologies. I'm not quite sure what's going on with my camera, so I'm not actually a disembodied stream of light. I do have a face. Apparently, I can't see it. I can just see the background, so that's probably best for everybody then. Again, my name is Patrick. I'm a program specialist in Region 10. I'll be your moderator for this session. And we're going to be discussing lesson learned from 3 programs as they've kind of adapted their client training, job placement, and career pathway approaches for use during, and I think equally as important, for use after COVID as well. And I think all of this is for the ultimate goal of kind of upskilling, and or kind of reskilling clients, reskilling their job search and job placement skills. So our speakers will also kind of touch on how leveraging partnerships can assist with the goal of expanding employment opportunities for TANF clients. And we have 3 fantastic speakers today, and just given where we are in the day, I'm going to go ahead and skip reading their bios, save us a little time. Those bios, which are fantastic, are in your meeting materials, but our 3 speakers are Katy Ciotti, the TANF director from the Morongo Band of Mission Indians, Andrew Hanson, who is the director of academic success at Salish Kootenai College, and then Ryan Howard. He's the executive director of the Owens Valley Career Development Center. And much like the last session, the last 10-15 minutes following these presentations, we'll break out into small groups for some short brainstorming. And I think with that, I will turn it over to Katy. Katy?
Thank you, Patrick. I'm not sure if you can see me or hear me. I can't.
I can do both.
Okay, great. I didn't have the setting to stare at myself, which is good. So thank you for having me. Thank you to OFA and ACF for inviting me to share a little bit about what Morongo's doing to prepare our participants, especially in the context of work opportunities and subsidized employment. We serve Native families in Riverside and San Bernardino counties, so 2 of the largest counties in the state and in the nation. We serve TANF cases, purposes 3 and 4, transitional, diversion, and emergency with non-recurring short-term benefits. And many of our participants, our families, are non-needy and child-only cases. Our average caseload is about 110. Of that, we average about 68 to 78% TANF assistance, the rest non-assistance, and our population of families that are required to complete work activities is usually around 30%. So just a little bit of background on our program and why our services are designed the way that they are. Can I move the slides? Or thank you. So what this pandemic has shown all of us is that the workforce is changing, right? So we've had to adapt our own programs to scale to remote work, to work towards digitalization and automation. And so the question becomes, how do we re-educate our participants and prepare them to fill that gap, particularly with digital technologies? So we know that jobs are at risk of changing or becoming obsolete. And so our goal is to prepare our participants to be competitive in the workforce. We've taken some various approaches to that I'd like to share today. I know based off of what the Future of Jobs report for this year told us that 40% of current employees' skills are expected to change in the next 5 years. Sorry, slide, Patrick. We know that that also means that employers are going to have to train a large percentage of their employees to be able to transition into those new fields. And that training can take anywhere from 2 weeks to 5 months to gain those required skills. So we're looking at that in the tribal TANF perspective of that's the training time that we have with our participants to help them prepare. Luckily, most of the high demand skills remain rooted in problem solving, self-management, working with people, technology, and that's the stuff that as tribal TANF we are already equipped to prepare our participants. So our approach, slide. Our approach focused on 3 main areas. So we knew based off of preparing our own workforce and extending that to our TANF participants that we needed to adapt training. So moving towards digitalization. We also needed to focus on upskilling or reskilling, which allows us to expand our capabilities and employability of our participants. And finally, expanding our partnerships. So we have a good subsidized employment network that we were able to focus on there. So we were focused on learning new skills to qualify for different jobs, certificate programs, and some of our programs I have to share here with you. Slide. So the first step was getting everyone comfortable with remote work. And so the way that we did that is through equipment and training. So first we had to determine the need. We were able to do that by a participant survey. So we needed to know, do they have laptops? Do they have phones? Do they have internet? And we were able to do that with an easy survey that allowed us to provide supportive services and incentives. So we found through our survey results that many of our youth were covered in the area of laptop and technology by the school districts. So we were able to focus on just our adults who were maybe attending virtual learning courses and just didn't have, maybe they had a phone and that's really hard to manage on a small screen and they just needed laptops. So we were able to look at our supportive services for TANF clients and then incentives for transitional and purposes 3 and 4 clients and see what we could do to provide that. And then of course, make referrals. The training portion of that, we were really able to focus on video conferencing platforms. So we all had to learn how to be productive in this type of environment using Zoom, using various, we'd use Facebook Live, we use YouTube, and then, setting those expectations on remote work and what does that look like? What is etiquette for the workplace when we're communicating virtually, and then changing all of our programs to virtual. So we have always offered job readiness courses on site during the week, and our participants were able to complete work activities, work hours there, and we had to switch that to virtual programming. So there's definitely a learning curve, as I'm sure many of you experienced yourselves. Slide. So this is just a snapshot of our transitional, our transition to virtual services. So these are our core work activities. We offer adult basic education, GED prep classes, work readiness. We focus on not only technical skills, but soft skills that employers are looking for. we have career development tracks, which are career advancement workshops that may be facilitated by our employment services team. I think I have an example of those in the following slide, but job training that's specific to skilled trades, and finally work experience and subsidized employment. So we offer one-on-one job preparation with our participants, and that's all been, we've been successful using Zoom and teleconferencing for that, to be able to continue those services. Slide. So one of the challenges that we've run into with participants is it's been difficult to motivate them to look for work during a pandemic. The transition to online learning is sometimes met with resistance, and which we all understand that. We're online all day with our kids, trying to help them through virtual learning, and then asking families to get on a 2-hour Zoom program for work activities is tough. So based on survey responses, we were able to customize the times and durations, and kind of work with families in that regard. When it came to job development workshops, we knew that we had to combine some of that work-life balance, stress management workshops with job search and career advancement. So, people just weren't attending resume writing on its own. But when we combined it with communication strategies or stress management or self-care, we had better attendance. So that finding that balance has been very helpful to us. Stress management is definitely a key element to all of our job development career advancement workshops now. Slide. So one of our biggest resources and work activity that's very popular with our participants in our area is subsidized employment. And the reason for that is they are able to gain valuable work experience, but also we disregard that income during a 6-month period. So it's definitely motivating to participants to enter into that training program. We were lucky, we were very fortunate over the last year during the COVID pandemic, we didn't see a decrease in subsidized employment. So we actually saw an 83% increase in our contracts, and we attribute that to the fields that they're in. So healthcare, manufacturing, logistics, those essential businesses that had a higher than average need for employees, maintained or increased contracts with our program. So we are fortunate that that's the status of our area. The next slide is just an example of some of our partners. We have some larger employers here, so some of the casinos and the tribes. However, our success rate is higher with small businesses, and we attribute that to the one-on-one attention. A lot of the larger organizations don't need the reimbursement that we provide. So for a 6-month period, we reimburse the employer for all payroll costs. And, sometimes that's challenging with a larger employer. So specifically our home health care providers and our manufacturing and logistics employer partners have really remained great partners through this transition. So that's definitely where we're focusing. And finally, just some takeaways, some recommendations or points that I'd like to share when you're looking to leverage those partnerships is to be strategic when you're choosing those partners. So we're able to match the skills and interests of our participants with the employers in our community, rather than having that pool of employers available and trying to find participants that match. So we discovered that by trial and error, but that's been successful for us for the last few years. Again, we focus on small businesses that don't have the budget to hire and train employees and are willing to work on building skills that our participants may need special attention, and setting clear expectations. So we're really upfront about, we only have 1 or 2 participants that will fit this need. Can you interview them and see if they're a good fit? And if they're not, we're pretty transparent. Finally, being flexible to meet the employer's needs. So we're able to design or modify placements and the reimbursement process and kind of customize that for the employer. We found that having that flexibility allows us to have repeat placements with an employer. So we have a central contact person assigned, which is our job developer at both of our sites, and they check in regularly, and we have an evaluation process in place so that we're evaluating our employers and as well as the participants. And we're able to customize training based on each position and organization. So this is the reskilling and matching participants that are already in SEP. That allows us to develop a skills plan tailored to the employer's needs, and then we're able to build that into programming. So that's helped us to be successful and maintain that high level of employer partnerships. I'm happy to answer any questions following the session. Again, thank you for letting me share what's been successful and challenging to us at Morongo.
Thanks, Katie. Drew, you want to go ahead?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Thank you for having me in here. Drew Hanson from Salish Kootenai College in Pablo, Montana. We're up in the northwest corner of Montana on the Confederated Salish Kootenai and Ponderay, or Flathead Reservation. I want to speak a little bit to the COVID-19 education shift. I'll talk about how we responded to this, but education as a whole, higher education, from the very entry, which is, our high set and placement, all the way through like a degree seeking program. So higher education has remained pretty stagnant for a long time. Really the model's been around for over 100 years, that it is a terminal degree that you're seeking. You're going to school at least for 4 years, leaving with the terminal degree. The addition of the associates, certificate programs, that's lingered, but it's really not been something that is a focus of mainstream higher education. So this is a true disruptor. The COVID-19 is a true disruptor. Like in the technology world, anything that causes a shift in the normal way of doing things, this has been the disruptor for education. Good, bad, we'll look at that just a little bit, how that can actually help tribal communities. So I'm going to first talk about before, because education wasn't very healthy before. We had rising costs nationally. There was a disconnect with colleges from what the workforce needs were. So a lot of jobs, a lot of well-paying jobs, needed jobs, didn't require a 4-year degree. But the college world wasn't responding to that. We had significant equity issues. They still exist, but that was one of the big before things that was increasing, was some equity issues, especially with minorities and underserved populations. Falling completion rates. There's a student debt crisis that's massive. I believe this year it's expected to be about $1.52 trillion in unpaid debt. And then there was just a general lack of response from institutions to these needs. So fairly apathetic as an industry goes. The colleges have just kind of been stagnant. That's not to say all of them have been. There's been some really innovative things that have happened. And then COVID. So during COVID, or at the onset of COVID, we had to, as an industry, just respond in two different ways. One, accelerate communications, processes, everything that we could to kind of a warp speed. A good example of that is, I think, is the digital purchase order for our institution. You know, it's something we bounced around for 3 years. We were able to accomplish it in about 2 weeks once COVID hit. The second is that do whatever it takes not to lose students during this. We really had to support students, their health, their needs, their home communities. Salish Kootenai College has anywhere between 55 and 70 different tribes represented any given term. So it's not just our communities that we're impacting. We've had students that are away from home and going back home when we had to shut down, or not being able to go back home during the shutdown. With that increased speed, some things happen, some things that we noticed, pros and cons, that were kind of encouraging for education or discouraging. The pros would be increased access. I mean, instantly, we were forced to look at things and provide ways of accessing materials in a way that we've never had to before. A real great example of the relevance of this is our enrollment actually went up between spring and fall for the first time in a couple of years. Generally, colleges' enrollments are going down in a liberal arts type college. Ours went up. So there's a good indication that access is wanted and needed. The increased automation and digitalization of processes, innovative responses to online issues, especially with those institutions that really didn't have an online presence. More student service support became available immediately. So we are able to service students after hours with them at home, tutoring, mental health services, things of that nature. And then colleges were forced to make changes that were effective, some maybe not as effective, but at least the conversations were happening where you're really looking at, okay, what is happening now? What are we having to do now? But what are our contingencies going forward? And so a lot of those conversations happen around strategic planning or accreditation. I know our strategic planning went from a 5-year strategic plan down to a 2-year, just because we want to be more nimble, pliable, and able to adapt to what happens as we come into a new normal. So some of the disadvantages were not all the changes were high quality. And I think a lot of you have students that were accessing their K-12 education from home. And many saw that the quality might not have been there across the board. It happened so rapidly that we didn't have a lot of the controls out there. We didn't have the assessment quality that was needed to say, this is good or bad. It was, this is what we can do. There's definitely, this put a magnifying glass on technology gaps. There's the digital divide, which is kind of a generational thing, our understanding of technology. Connectivity, which overwhelmingly affected more of the underserved, underrepresented students and regions. And then access to quality tech tools. This was an interesting one, is how, we have great labs on campus and infrastructure that is amazing, but immediately we had to look at how do we get that into the students' hands where they're at. We already knew the numbers of students trying to write term papers and whatnot on a phone was pretty high. It was extremely high in the spring, but we rolled out laptop, rental borrowing programs, community-based hotspots, everything we could to increase that access. Another con would be changes that were made during this that were positive, and funding that became available during this is starting to dry up and is not as sustainable. So hopefully, this is a big hope, is the best things we can keep and put them into practice on a long-term basis. And the other piece is momentum on many initiatives that were really worthy, that were big projects, and they got put on the back burner. And then things that we never even thought of were accelerated. And so it just kind of shuffled. It shuffled a lot of things. So now that's kind of where we had to, I mean, in education as a whole, that's where education had to adapt quickly. And now we're looking at what is to come. We're starting to look at the future. What are our takes from this? There's really still an uncertainty. We don't know how long this is going to go on. We don't know how many more contingencies we're going to have to come up with before we see some light. But there is an underlying hope that higher education in the best parts will be a permanent and lasting change. This definitely is going to change the scope of education, K-12 and higher education. New models have been developed. Scalability of those models is unbelievable for institutions like ours. I think the tribal communities have long wanted more online availability within the tribal college communities. They really need schools that have the infrastructure to be able to push that out. A lot of schools have, because of their missions are more related to their home communities, have resisted that a little bit. And I think this has kind of broken that shell. So I think the availability of online materials through tribal colleges is definitely going to be a permanent change. Willingness of institutions to provide support services. That's a big deal. You know, being able to access tutoring 24 hours a day and those elements is important to our students. One of the big things that we're realizing is the small number of courses that we actually offer in the evening hours. This kind of highlighted, you know, just a whole nother issue with access for us. Alternative structures to degree programs are being more widely explored. More certificate-based programs, stackable certificate programs, upskilling. Traditional colleges are going to have to respond to this shift that it was kind of started prior to COVID with the onset of like Google's campus and Amazon's where you can go to school for free. And it's for them, it's a program to recruit potential employees, and you can get these stackable certifications. I think traditional colleges will have a harder time recruiting students with all the new remote availabilities. Students are going to be able to have more options locally with their local institution, or with the higher level institutions, they don't have to leave home. It cuts the cost down quite a bit. With some institutions, we're going to see them, you know, their brick and mortar kind of decline altogether. I think scalable learning with lots of stop outs is going to be more and more common. And that is where you even if you're going for a nursing degree, it's building those certifications and those skills along the way to where if you have to stop out, if there's a life event or something and you stop out, you're not starting back at ground zero. You're leaving with tangible things. You may not have your degree, but you might have your nurse assistant, your phlebotomy, or other programs. So I think we'll see an increase in the stop out type programs. And education's never been in a higher need. And I think people are aware of that. And they're realizing that mainstream education might not be the end all answer. So the need for more direct skill programs, less of that holistic, well-rounded liberal arts four-year degree is the emphasis is going to be less on those, and shorter, more direct paths are going to be increased. The other thing is the increased career planning and holistic advising, really getting students right where they need to be right away. And that comes from a variety of reasons, including financial aid, credit caps, and many other things. But COVID definitely amplifies that and puts us in a place where I think there's going to be a big look at helping students get on the correct path sooner. So it really becomes a more student-based, student-centered atmosphere. Tribal colleges in general, I don't know how many folks have heard that, the tribal college movement, where it really is it's a comfortable place for tribal students to come. And it's become almost a model within mainstream education. One, because of the funding, kind of the funding structure, but two, the atmosphere, kind of the sense of family. It's bigger than a community college. You have the 4-year degree options. We're even starting our grad school program this year with our natural resources. And hopefully soon we will be starting some others. But the tribal colleges already has a movement. And now with these tools and with these changes, hopefully we can start providing a level of access that just has not been available before. We've always attempted in the past to deliver classes either synchronously or somewhat synchronously with different areas. We work in Washington, we've worked in Idaho, we've worked in North Dakota. So we've had a lot of opportunities, but they're really place-based. They're not as agnostic as what we're going to see because of COVID, the advancements that we saw because of COVID. Opportunities for partnerships with, like, our local TANF and my department. We partner for our HiSET program. We do all the HiSET preparation, testing, and then we have different pathways. We're working on a grant with the American Indian College Fund right now to develop kind of a work-based track and a college-based track with our HiSET prep. So while they're doing that, they're getting the job skills or they're getting the college skills so they can jump right from that HiSET into their next advancement. Placement tests are changing as well. That's something that I'm working on currently with SKC. We are working with the ACT College Ready program, which is sponsored by NROC. And that is where students as early as their junior year can take a diagnostic, depending on kind of where they believe they're going to go in their post-high school career. That will kick back where they are in relation to being college ready. And then it also uses all kinds of resources, including EdReady and Khan Academy, to build a pathway that they can work on prior to coming to the college. So they can work on these lessons. It helps guide them on this pathway. So when they get here, we don't have to do a placement test. We can look at their college ready scores and practices and see where they're at and be able to plug them right into the best fitting place for them. Another big issue that I want to bring out is the developmental issue. We know students don't necessarily always come prepared for college academically. The idea of developmental classes has been around for a long time. That is, if you're not ready, then you get placed in a course that's not a college level course to get you ready. The statistics behind that is quite poor, as far as it puts a barrier in achieving your terminal degree. The statistics are quite frightening. They're down in the teens if you have one developmental class added to your schedule, because it gets you out of it gets you away from that cohort that you start with, maybe puts you out of alignment with the curriculum pathway that's out there. It can really be a big barrier. So you're seeing a lot of colleges put in the co-requisite model, where you will start with that college level class, but have an additional class that just supports getting through that one class. So we recognize that you're not quite ready yet, but we're going to give you all these supports and you can earn credit for that. We have to be careful. Colleges have to be careful with that because of credit caps and financial aid opportunities. We also with developmental, we're seeing the numbers decline. And that's a little bit of a scary thing, because there's not a real answer as to why developmental numbers are declining. It's not necessarily that the students are coming, that much more students are coming prepared for college. It has a lot to do with colleges bringing down their college level, their first year college level courses. So there are less students in the developmental because the statistics are so bad. And partially to do with the co-requisite model and other strategies to try and get students past that barrier and into college. We work very hard with all incoming students through TANF, through different programs. We have a lot of career-based planning, mapping. We have partnerships with a lot of different community organizations, businesses, tribal entities for placing students for interns early on. We try and get them into internships as quickly as we can, and we try and get them in their degree programs to have field study practices as quickly as they enter the college. So with that, that's kind of a rundown on kind of our interpretation of what's been happening with COVID-19 and what advantages might come of it.
Drew, I'm sorry, there's one quick question I think you can answer real quick. What ages or grades do you work with?
So we are a four-year college. So we have the typical freshman is 18. However, we do have programs that reach down into the high school, whether it's a dual enrollment or advanced placement type courses. So that goes into the 16, 17-year-old ages. Our HiSET program starts at 15.
Gotcha. Great. Thanks so much. Much appreciated, Drew. Okay, Ryan, it's all you.
All right. Manahu, everybody. New Ryan Howard, Minaniadu, Nupaya Hupoe Unikimaru. My name is Ryan Howard. I'm a citizen of the Bishop Paiute tribe, and I am from the Owens Valley, which is also known in our language as the place where the water flows. So I'm participating today from our administrative headquarters in Bishop, California, which are in the traditional homelands of my ancestors, the Paiute and Shoshone people. I'm honored and also humbled to be able to serve my people as the executive director of the Owens Valley Career Development Center, which is a tribal consortium of 12 tribes that provides education and human services in Central California. So as I mentioned, our headquarters of our organization are in Bishop on the Bishop Paiute Reservation, which is located on the eastern side of the Sierra Nevada mountain range. The mountains play a really important part in our tribal customs and lifeways. And you can see some of the dramatic peaks of our homelands on this slide. Our traditional lands are ones of extremes. So our highest, we have the highest point within the continental United States, which is Mount Whitney nearby, and then also within a few hours driving the lowest point in the US, Death Valley. So these extremes really show the adaptability of our tribal peoples and the ingenuity it takes to live in these types of environments. And I really take strength in knowing that I come from a history of people who've adapted to change, persevered, and thrived, even in challenging environments. Next slide, please. So our organization is governed by the Owens Valley Paiute Shoshone Board of Trustees, which is a 7-member board that's comprised of representatives from 3 tribes, and that includes the Big Pine Paiute tribe, the Bishop Paiute tribe, and also the Lone Pine Paiute Shoshone tribe. Next slide, please. In terms of our organizational history, we were created in 1976 by our board in order to increase vocational educational opportunities here in the Owens Valley. Prior to that time, there were really no post-secondary education institutions here locally, not even a community college. And so we were one of the first entities that went forward with trying to increase vocational education by providing short-term and certificate trainings to our people. In 2001, we had the opportunity to apply for a tribal TANF grant in order to provide assistance and services in Inyo County. We did that successfully. And then in 2002 and 2003, expanded our tribal TANF service delivery area to include Kern, Kings, Fresno, and Tulare counties. And then finally in 2013 and 2018, we completed a final expansion to Mono County, which is just north of Inyo County, and also to Ventura County, just northwest of Los Angeles. So we provide a number of program services. As I mentioned, we provide tribal TANF services, with our grant through the Office of Family Assistance. We also have an almost near match from the state of California Department of Social Services, which we're very appreciative of. We also operate a Native American career and technical education program that's funded by a grant through the U.S. Department of Education. We also operate Early Head Start by operating 3 centers serving 4 tribal communities. And then finally, an American Indian Education Center grant, which funds an after-school program in Kern County and is funded by the state of California. I'm sorry, next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit today more specifically about some initiatives we've been working on within our Tribal TANF program, but also utilizing our Native American Career and Technical Education program as one of our partners in terms of providing that service. Next slide, please. Just to give you a little bit of a visual of where we are located, as I mentioned, we are in Central California. You can see the counties that we are providing services in that are outlined there in orange. We're also providing those services to 12 partner tribes that have designated us as the lead agency for administering tribal TANF to their communities. As you can see, our service area is very large. If you're familiar with the geography of California, between the boundaries of Mono and Inyo counties and Tulare and Fresno is the Sierra Nevada mountain range. So those run directly through there make it a little bit difficult in terms of transportation because there's not necessarily direct routes directly through the mountains. You either have to drive north or drive south to get around them. So from our service area, from our most northern office in Mono County, driving down to our most southern office in Ventura, it's about a 7.5-hour drive. So you can tell it's a very large and vast territory. It also encompasses a number of communities, both urban, so cities like Bakersfield, Fresno, and Ventura, small rural communities, and of course our tribal reservations and rancherias that are located within the service area. The economies of those locations vary considerably. So we really have to pay attention to job development and job growth, and also to developing partnerships with workforce development agencies and employers in order to both train and employ our program participants. Next slide, please. So as was mentioned in other presentations today and also throughout this meeting, we've had a number of challenges that COVID-19 has forced us to respond to. In terms of the employment environment, we've had businesses that have been forced to reduce staffing, some even to close, and even ones that have had to change their model to be compliant with public health guidelines. We've had to follow safety protocols that limit in-person interactions, and so many of our businesses have had to respond to that as well. And then we've also been forced to rely on technology in new ways. Even this meeting is a great example of that. So early on in the pandemic, we really challenged our employees to think creatively in terms of that pivot to services that could continue to meet the demands of our participants, but in a safe manner that recognize that need to support physical distancing from others. Next slide, please. So what I'm going to talk about for just a few minutes is our American Indian Apprenticeship Initiative. We all know that it's very important to connect with our local economic development agencies who have a solid understanding of current and future employment opportunities available in our respective communities. So in our local area here in Inyo County, I'm going to talk specifically about our program we've been working on for the past year. Our tribal people in our area have a very proud history of artistry and craftsmanship. That really has gone across the generations to having a large number of our families that have some involvement in terms of craftsmanship, construction trades, that type of thing. In particular, our tribe that hosts our administrative headquarters even has a forced career account that builds all of the tribal homes that are built on the reservation, and even has built some of the tribe's economic ventures, including a new gas station and convenience store that are set to open very soon. So our TANF participants continue to have that strong interest in construction trades, and there are local employment opportunities. Because of that, our Native American Career and Technical Education grant has allowed us to partner with our TANF program to provide intensive construction education training that originally started with our partnership with Saracosa Community College, which is part of the Kern Community College District, who provide a certified program to our participants that's certified through the National Center for Construction Education and Research. So with construction, we know there are some things to really keep in mind. Residential construction in California is predicted to slow in the near future. However, there are several large commercial projects in development in our service area and really throughout California, and that includes green energy projects that might not even have started yet, but are definitely in the works. We really had the question of how can we best connect our TANF participants with living wage construction jobs because of both their interest and the employment opportunities that are available. So building partnerships with local trade unions and other workforce development partners, we're better able to connect our TANF participants to training and employment via pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship opportunities that allow our participants to earn while they learn. Next slide, please. One of the unique things that we've learned through this partnership is that the building trade unions have a program that's called the Multicore Craft Curriculum, also known as MC3. And that's a comprehensive 120-hour pre-apprenticeship training curriculum that's approved by the Building Trades National Apprenticeship and Training Committee. The purpose of the MC3 program is to increase the number of qualified candidates for apprenticeship across all of the crafts. So that includes cement masons, electricians, carpenters, all of the crafts. Increasing the diversity of apprenticeship candidates by recruiting women, people of color, and veterans. And also the third is to increase the retention rate among apprentices by providing them with a deeper understanding of both industry and the role of unions in construction. And one of the things that we have worked with our local trade unions is to really modify the curriculum so that it could be taught in a virtual setting. And so that was one of the pivots that we've been able to make in terms of providing this in our current environment. Next slide, please. The MC3 program sort of has a number of steps that need to be taken in order to be effective. So the trade unions really have an interest in making sure that there are actually construction jobs once somebody has completed the program. So there need to be construction jobs available to be able to get the training for your participants. So we really have worked to try and get letters of commitment from local tribes or other local governments that might have some of these larger construction projects in the work. And then we've been working, so from there, really the general contractor creates a project labor agreement that has signatories from the local trade unions, indicating that they will utilize our participants for training once they are awarded those contracts. So then the MC3 curriculum is then provided, which, as I mentioned, can be done virtually now. And after completing that curriculum, the TANF participants will be able to be placed in jobs with union contractors to get that pre-apprenticeship training. After completing the projects, the TANF participants will have gained valuable experience and will be able to pursue work with their union. And of course, as we all know, unions provide excellent wages, experience, job security, and retirement as benefits, which ultimately allow our program participants to exit the tribal TANF program. Next slide, please. So in terms of promotion and recruitment, we began promoting this at a virtual job fair that we held back in October. And this again was another pivot of an event that normally would be provided in person, but given the pandemic, pivoted to virtual. And again, it was a really great opportunity for our staff to kind of think creatively about how you design a career fair in the virtual setting. So virtual platforms, again, offer an excellent alternative to meeting in person and can be organized and formatted to allow for multiple presentations, and also that ability to connect employers with participants, even through breakout rooms and that type of thing. And it's our goal that even with connecting 1 or 2 participants in pre-apprenticeship, that will be helpful for assisting in future recruitment and programming. So as you all are likely have experienced, once you get one person to do it, word of mouth is very effective in the tribal community. And we're hoping that the ability to connect even just one participant in getting the training and getting involved in apprenticeship, that'll really start that process of word of mouth and will encourage others to participate as well. Next slide. So with that, that is my presentation for this afternoon. I thank you all for listening, and really just want to say thank you for being given the opportunity to present on our program. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. And we do have one question that's come in. I think it's hopefully probably one you can answer pretty quickly. So is there a set wage for the earn while they learn, minimum wage or something else?
You know, it really depends on the opportunity. So pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship, generally when somebody's in an apprenticeship, it would likely be whatever the prevailing wage is for that type of craft. So that can be pretty substantial. Pre-apprenticeship, there generally is at least the minimum wage is the commitment that will be paid to somebody that's involved in pre-apprenticeship.
Thanks, Ryan. And is there someplace where folks can go for more info on MC3?
You know, that's a really good question. You know, most of our information on MC3 has come from our local building trade unions, you know, I have a feeling that if you do Google MC3 or Multicore craft curriculum, that might point somebody in the right direction from getting that information somewhere else.
Okay. Thanks again, Ryan, and thanks to all three of our speakers. That was great. So I think just given the time, I think we should kind of probably go ahead and transition to breakout rooms. Oh, there was one more question. Maybe just real quick. So for the TANF clients that are still receiving a cash grant in the apprenticeship, so for TANF clients, are they still receiving a cash grant while enrolled in the apprenticeship program and also getting a wage?
So I think it would really depend on the policies of the specific program. But generally apprenticeship is, I don't believe is considered subsidized because those are wages that are being paid directly from, you know, the contractors. So it would depend on how someone's program was designed. You know, generally, as I mentioned, if somebody's in an apprenticeship, that can be a prevailing wage, which can be pretty substantial, you know, being $20+ an hour, which is great for our participants, but oftentimes means that transition off the program takes place a little faster.
And Ryan, do you set up the apprenticeship for the client with the contractor, or is that someone else?
So we work with the, we're working to guide the participants into the program. So the building trades, they're the ones that actually teach the curriculum, the MC3 program. And then we interface with the building trades in terms of setting up the next level of pre-apprenticeship for the client. So we help them and we guide them through the process.
Perfect, perfect. Thanks, Ryan. And thanks again, everyone. So Steve, I think we can go ahead and transition into maybe a quick breakout.